Good to see everybody. We're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about Laemmle, we're going to talk about the capital improvement program, and we're going to talk about the drought. And you might not think so, but all three of these things are linked. And you're going to see how they link and how they all come together. But what's really interesting at the start of this is a discussion about the Laemmle Theater proposal. And to get a good understanding of what we're talking about, I need to give you a little bit of history. And we do have quite a few people here in Santa Clarita that really like the Laemmle theaters. And so we've been hearing from them as well. Anyway, at once upon a time, there was every story starts once upon a time. There was the Newhall Redevelopment Agency. And in a redevelopment agency, it was a state initiative that allowed a city to declare a section of the city blighted, and the state would return a portion of the taxes that were normally paid to allow the municipality or the organization that's declared the redevelopment agency to upgrade that area and remove blight. So this goes all the way back to George Caravallo, and he at one time wanted to, he thought, well, wouldn't it be a great idea? I'll just declare the whole city a redevelopment agency, but that didn't work. So they ended up with Newhall. And so the improvements on Main Street, the streetscape improvements that you see, and all those were done by the redevelopment agency, and they had a lot of discussions about what they were going to do, and they did it in they documented in the Newhall downtown Newhall specific plan. Subsequently to that, the library was built, and because of the fact that the city was unable to acquire the special library tax that the county had been collecting, that was also paid for with redevelopment agency money. So as things were going along, there were several council members who were really anxious to move automotive businesses out of Newhall. They wanted to upgrade the area, and they considered automotive businesses as not to be the kind of businesses that they wanted in the area. And some of the ones, I don't know if anybody ever dealt with Canyon Muffler, but they moved as a part of the process. And the city went ahead and with redevelopment agency money, they purchased 2 square blocks opposite of the library. Those are the 2 square blocks right now that have nothing on them. And they provided incentives for automotive businesses to move. So if you move out of here, we'll pay you so much so that you can go ahead and move and vacate this property. Well, one smart automotive business owner took them up on it and moved across the street. Wow, wasn't that something? And so when that happened, you might understand that they got a little ticked, and they voted to demolish the buildings. Now, basically at the same time as that happened, the state decided, Governor Brown decided that they were losing too much revenue by these redevelopment agencies, so he ended the redevelopment agency the activities, and the city said, wow, we got these 2 square blocks. We'll transfer ownership of the 2 square blocks from the redevelopment agency to the city so the state can't get it, and we'll demolish the building so no one can build on it. And I remember going up to a council meeting and saying, are you kidding? You think they won't notice? You think some smart attorney at the state isn't going to say, I want my money? And that's exactly what happened. So the state did whatever they did, whatever methodology they used. The city doesn't tell us those kind of things. And said, you have to return those 2 square blocks to us, and if you want that ground, you have to buy them from us. And that's done right now, administered by the State Department of Finance. So if you go to a council meeting, you hear them talking about DOF, that's who that is. That's a state agency. And they agreed, however, to allow the city to administer development of the 2 square blocks. So the city decided to send out an RFP to see if they could get a developer that wanted to put a project in that area that corresponded to what they would like to see. Now, I saw some articles, newspaper articles, that were several years old that said at the time, Jason Crawford was quoted as saying, well, we've been talking to Laemmle for the last 10 years. So it wasn't much of a surprise when Laemmle became the favored project. Now, we've heard several different stories about how this process occurred, but I'll give you the last one that we heard. And that was that they sent out this RFP to 98 interested parties. Only 5 of the parties responded. And of those, only 2 talked about an arts-type theater in their response and subsequently sent in a letter. And Laemmle was selected. So on July the 14th, 2015, our summer surprise, you know what a summer surprise is, don't you? It seems like every time the council goes on hiatus in the last several years, they put something on there that nobody knows about, and it's going to get discussed while they're gone, and then it's going to come back when they come back. You might have remembered that with the library. You might have remembered that with the billboard issue. Those are the kind of, we call that our summer surprise. And so agenda item 18 said that they wanted to enter in an exclusive negotiation agreement for Old Town New Hall redevelopment area block, which is those 2 square blocks, and transfer of the development block to the successor agency, which means they're going to transfer ownership back to the state agency, which is the successor agency that handles folding up the redevelopment agency, and then they want to enter into an agreement to develop it, and that's all done in city speak. And so the translation really turned out to be the city is entering into an agreement, an exclusive negotiating agreement with Laemmle and with Serrano Development to build a project on the 2 square blocks. That's really what's going to happen. And in that staff report, if you read the staff report, there were just, a couple of words in the middle of it that kind of raised the hair on the back of my neck when it said, oh yeah, the city will be making contributions to the project. Okay. There you go. So the project is Laemmle. And Laemmle has a following. They have a cult following. It's an art-type theater. And so I thought, you know what? I don't know much about Laemmle. I'm not actually much of a theater goer at all. So I thought, I'll do a little research. You know me. I just start flipping my fingers through the keyboards, and I'll see what I can find out about Laemmle. Well, Laemmle, pronounced Laemmle, is a group of family-run art house movie theaters in the Los Angeles area. And this comes off of their website. So we'll talk about how true that is in a minute. It was established in 1938, so they've been around a long time. And it's owned and operated by Robert Laemmle and Greg Laemmle, his son. And they're related to the originator of United Pictures, Carl Laemmle. So these are people that are connected. These are connected people in the industry. These are not exactly people that are destitute. They have a fair amount of oomph behind them. And so when I looked at it, I found out that there are 7 operating Laemmle theaters. And notice they don't typically call it a Laemmle theater. They give it a name, but if you search on it as Laemmle, they'll come up. One is the Claremont 5 in Claremont. That's a 5-screen theater. The Monica Fourplex in Santa Monica. Music Hall 3 in Beverly Hills. I wonder why Beverly Hills only has 3. Oh, well. The Playhouse 7 in Pasadena. The Royal Theater in West Los Angeles. Town Center 5 in Encino. And North Hollywood 7, NoHo 7 in North Hollywood. And as we found out today, because I attended the Laemmle presentation at OTNA, at the Old Town New Hall Association in the Repertory Theater on Main Street, the Glendale Theater, another Glendale Theater, is currently under construction. So I went to their Facebook page, and it says, Laemmle has been known as the secret path to Oscar qualifying. And since they have been used by independent short films and documentation for that purpose. And it talks about them providing a service designed to enable a film to qualify for Academy Awards, charging a flat rate, and giving the producers all of the box office receipts. So I thought that was interesting. And I wonder how that works to their bottom line. But that's not what they do all the time, as we found out. This is off their Facebook page. Well, Laemmle also has a dark side to it. And I was very, very surprised to find out that there have been 6 Laemmle theaters that have gone out of business in relatively modern times. The Los Feliz Theater went out of business in 1987. The Fairplex 3 went out of business in 2006. The Laemmle Grand Fourplex went out of business in 2009. The Sunset 5 in West Los Angeles went out of business in 2011. And the Boulevard Cinema in Lancaster went out of business in 2012 after operating less than 2 years. And the Fallbrook 7, which was in the Fallbrook Mall in Woodland Hills, went out of business after more than 11 years. And I would think if you can't keep an art house theater open in Woodland Hills, close to Warner Center, there's got to be something wrong. But they just say they were unable to get a new lease, and so they closed the theater. So it's not like every location is a success, obviously. And you know, this kind of surprises me, because when I talk about people being connected, how successful do you think you could be asking somebody for millions of dollars to invest in your business if almost half of the ones that you started are no longer in business? You know, I don't know. I just. But you know what? I didn't want to say anything that would appear not to be unbiased. So I decided to go and find out what's playing at Laemmle. Okay? And so I went to their Facebook page. And it's talked about Tambourine's Court. Tambourine's Court is a quietly devastating, absurdist portrait of injustice, caste prejudice, and vernal politics in contemporary India, playing in Beverly Hills. The Prophet, something that talks about the elegant poetry with stunning animated sequences, and that's playing in Claremont and Encino. And so now all of a sudden I began to realize that all of these particular movies don't play in all the movie houses, right? And the last one was The Kindergarten Teacher, the story of a teacher who becomes at first enchanted and then ultimately consumed by the poetic genius of her 5-year-old student. So there you go. And that's in Beverly Hills and Encino. So I started thinking, well, if they're not playing, you know, the art house type movies in all of the theaters, what are they playing in the theaters? So I just happened to pick Claremont because I saw Claremont on there. I said, what's playing in Claremont on August the 15th? And I found that the end of the tour was playing in Claremont. And I also found out they had 4 showtimes, so that you could go and you could visit what was going on. But then I noticed that the rest of the movies, The Fantastic Four, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Mission Impossible, and Ricky and the Flash, are blockbuster hits, and they were playing there as well. And they are also right now on that same date playing in theater in the 2 theaters here in Santa Clarita. Those don't look like art house type movies to me. So when I was there today, I asked the question. I talked to a couple of folks and I said, well, I looked at Claremont and you guys aren't playing art house stuff. You're playing things that major blockbusters that are available in a bunch of other theaters. What's the deal? And they said, oh, well, you got to realize that's close to a college. I mean, that's what sells tickets there. And then I went, oh, okay. Now I understand. Now I know what we're talking about. So they said, yeah, you should try Pasadena. Before I went to Pasadena, I decided to find out what the end of the tour was. Don't know what that is? Well, it's a story that was about an author. And this Rolling Stone reporter goes on a tour with him, and the two men become closer, and they have a lot of fun, and they discover a bunch of new ideas. And actually, the trailer of that movie was available on the website. And like I said, I'm not particularly a theater goer, nor am I an artsy theater goer. And I had to suffer through the trailer, and it only lasted 3 minutes. So I don't know what to say. But anyway, it's there, and it is one of those kind of films. That's cool. Ticket prices are very reasonable. $12 for adults, and then they have a range of all different prices for different folks. And so I said, Pasadena. What's playing in Pasadena? Well, a movie called Air, Cop Car, The Prophet. We saw that one already, right? That was one of the Best of Enemies. Listen to the Tamarin. Phoenix. Irrational Man, excuse me. I'm having trouble reading all the way over there. What's next? Oh, boy. Keep going. Okay. There you go. Now, I didn't go back and look and see what each one of those movies were. But you can tell, but when you look at their schedules, all of those movies are playing today in Pasadena. They're just playing at different times on different screens. So that's what's going on. So it appears that the mix of films that are playing depend upon where you are, who they think their audience is. And so I stopped on the way out and talked to Tom Cole and said, Tom, I understand that they don't play all art house type films. I said, and I mentioned Claremont. And if you guys are negotiating an agreement, you need to negotiate in that agreement that you don't want them playing blockbusters, because if they're playing blockbusters, all that's happening is you're taking business away from one of the other theaters that are already here, and you didn't give them a $13 million subsidy. So this is seems to be the Laemmle business plan as it is today. This is the North Hollywood plan. North Hollywood is up and running. And Laemmle built a 7-screen cinemaplex, 34,000 square feet, which included second-floor office space and a ground-floor restaurant. So it's all in one building there. And then the North Hollywood Redevelopment Agency contractor, J.H. Snyder and Company, gave them the land and parking. So there was no price for land. They didn't have to provide any parking. The parking was provided to them by the redevelopment agency. They gave them $500,000 in development fund subsidy, and they provided a $2.6 million construction loan. Boy, oh boy, isn't that great? We can do better than that. Never let Clarita be underdone. But you can see this is kind of what they discovered. They discovered redevelopment agencies. And they understand that the money that comes out of redevelopment agencies are typically not as restrictive as if you're taking it out of the general fund. Well, there's been a lot of outreach, and there's been a lot of outreach in Santa Clarita. There's a K-Hits article on January the 6th, 2014. That article, by the way, is the one that quoted Crawford also as talking about Laemmle long before we've ever heard of it. And the City Council meeting on July 17th. There was a Signal article on July 17th. There's the SCV magazine on July 29th. SCV TV published something on July 31st. a Gazette article on the 24th, the Oversight Board meeting on August the 4th, and finally, the Old Town New Hall Association meeting today. Notice that the Old Town New Hall Association meeting is in a different color, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that one of the things that's been the most frustrating about this project is they've handed this to us in little itty-bitty pieces. So when we first heard about it at City Council meeting, all we knew was there's going to be a city contribution. Then when the presentation came out, someone slipped. And Mr. Crawford says, oh yeah, there's going to be a $12 to $13 million cost. And I asked at the meeting, what's the $12 or $13 million for? And afterwards I was told, well, $9 million of it is for a parking structure. Well, what's the other $5 million for? Well, we don't know yet. Okay. Then you go to the next meeting and you find out a little more. And you go to the next meeting, you find out a little more. And so I just took from the rest of this presentation, and every time you see something, a bullet in that color, it's because I learned about it today. So the Laemmle Theater project, 6 screens, 12,000 square feet, and as Mr. Laemmle told us today, 400 to 500 seats. Their projected sales for the first year is $450,000 with property taxes of about $6,500. Why that's important is because it kind of talks to what the feedback to the city is going to be in paying off the investment that they make. Serrano Development is the mixed-use development building is going to be 37,500 feet. Ground floor is going to be a restaurant and retail, and over the top is going to be a 46-unit residential building. And they've decided that they're only going to provide 1.5 parking spaces for each unit of residential underground underneath the building. And I don't know about you, but I have not gone to an area, well, just like right next door, which is just condos. And inside that, the parking is horrible. And they have 2 parking spaces per unit, and they still don't have enough parking. And you go, I mentioned it today at Otten. I said, go just down the street and go up Via de Oro. See if you can find and see a curb. Because there's cars parked all the way up and down. It's just, there's not enough parking. Why, you've been underparking things. Why are you underparking them even more? And, of course, the answer to me came back, well, that's because of the New Hall specific plan. Really? We're just following the New Hall specific plan. Well, if you are, then why aren't you building a 400-stall parking garage on both ends of New Hall Avenue on Main Street before you start? Because right now, the city is only planning a 300-unit parking structure next to those buildings. They project sales of $7.7 million and property taxes of $22,900 for the first year. So the city of Santa Clarita now has a part of this project, a 300-unit parking structure. And when you look at the New Hall specific plan, that was supposed to be a 400-unit parking structure. And it was supposed to be built before you infill development to fill it. And it's pretty well sized as far as I'm concerned, for the theater and for the residential. Because the theater guys themselves say, we're going to take up at least half of it. Okay? Okay. And I believe that the residential is underparked by about 100 parking spaces. So they're going to turn around and they're probably going to take a third of it. And the overall parking in New Hall probably is going to go down for the remaining people because they're no longer going to have this 2 square blocks to park on. So today we discovered also that the $4.5 million, the rest of that $13 million, is going to go as a construction subsidy to Serrano. So we're going to pay $13 million to bring this development to Santa Clarita. So what's the projected revenue? Well, if you read the staff reports and you read all the stuff that came with it, Laemmle said that they expected to sell 200,000 tickets per year. I reminded them today that 200,000 tickets per year is 546 tickets, 365 days a year. Every single day, you've got to average that number. And if that was true, I estimated, at approximately $10 a ticket, that's $2 million. Okay? And, don't everybody, when they go to the theater, make a stop at the concession stand on the way in? So I thought, well, if the average person spends $10, that's another $2 million. That's $4 million. I thought I was being very generous in my estimate and I asked Mr. Laemmle, well, tell me, what's the approximate ticket sales in Pasadena? And he said, oh, well, we sell approximately 540 tickets a day. Okay. The restaurant and retail of $7.5 million a year. And they claim there'll be additional business to downtown Newhall for $4 million a year. So if you look at that, here's what happens. The project's estimated $12 to $13 million. $9 million goes for parking structure. The other money goes, as we found out today, for a construction subsidy. And the question is, where is the $12 or $13 million going to come from? Anybody got that in their pocket? So I asked Jason Crawford on August the 4th, after the oversight board meeting, I said, where's the money coming from? And his answer was, well, we don't know yet. Well, I know one thing. It's not in the capital improvement program. Remember, I told you all this stuff is linked? I can tell you what capital improvement projects are planned. This is not one of them. So the only place that this money can come from is the general fund. And if it comes from the general fund, what gets postponed? So the question is going to be, doesn't matter whether you, this isn't a pro-Laemmle, opposed to Laemmle discussion. This is a question of, would you rather put $13 million to get a movie theater out here? Or would you rather build the Canyon Country Community Center? Would you rather get $13 million to get the theater out here? Or do we want to build the library in Saugus? None of those projects, construction costs, are in the capital improvement program. You'll see later on that the Canyon Country Library plan is in the capital improvement program. So all this stuff is all going to hit about the same time. And I don't know about you, but I don't have the money. So if we look at the payback, and I call this the most optimistic payback analysis, and realizing they're talking about the construction being completed, remember I found out this today, on October of 2018. This all hits right in the same time as these other things. The city gets about 1% of property tax. I'm sorry, not 1% of property tax. They get 1% property. They get 1% sales tax. So whatever the sales tax is, 1% of it goes back to the city. So if you have $4 million in sales, that represents a cash flow to the city of $40,000. And then if the county collects $6,500 in property tax, the amount of money that goes back to the city is dictated by the county. So going to the County of Los Angeles website, they return 16% to the city. We get a whopping $1,000. Okay. So the restaurant and retail, same thing. $7.7 million, we get $77,000. $22,950, we get $3,672. And if the existing businesses all get another $4 million in sales, we get $40,000. Doesn't sound like a lot of money to me, because when you take this very optimistic payback to the city, it pays back in 80 years. You think that that business is going to be in business for 80 years? I don't know. And that's 80 years, providing, there's some very interesting things. One, providing they make their numbers, right? Providing they actually have 200,000 ticket sales per year. Number two, that they're not selling tickets to see movies that could be seen somewhere else, so they're stealing it from other places in the city, okay? And that they're still here in 80 years, that they don't become one of the casualty lists of what's going on. So my sense about this is that Laemmle does have a fair amount of community support. There are people that I've spoke with that when they say, boy, we really want Laemmle out here. It's a great theater. And then I ask them, well, what about the cost? And they get this pained expression on their face. And then I say, well, what about the parking in Newhall? And they get even a more pained expression on their face. So we as a group, or we as individuals, need to make a decision whether or not we want to do that. I looked at the signal reader poll. I thought it was interesting because if anybody of you have ever accessed the signal reader poll? No? Well, there's nothing in it to keep you from accessing it over and over and over and over and over again. So it's kind of, sometimes the numbers kind of get skewed. But the thing was, will you patronize a Laemmle movie theater if it's built in downtown Newhall? And the yeses were 191, and the noes were 277. So I don't know what that means. That's just not. So this is something you have to decide. Is this a good deal for Santa Clarita? We got some time left. We can do a little bit more research. Council doesn't get back together for another month. Is the public benefit of this project worth the cost? And that was something that I had a conversation with Stephen Daniels, as a matter of fact. And Stephen Daniels has started a podcast, and I'm his first client on that podcast. And let me have that. It's called The Talk of Santa Clarita, and it can either be heard over the internet or in iTunes. I guess it's going to be available on iTunes. We'll leave some flyers in the back of the room. But one of the questions he asked me was about public sponsorship of private ventures. And in the general case, I don't believe that the public should pay taxpayer money to put people in a private business. I didn't believe that in Field of Dreams. And my first inclination of this was, why are we paying a private company to go into business? And he said, under any circumstances? And I kind of was taken aback about that. And I said, well, if there's a substantial public benefit, maybe it would be, maybe certain things would be a good thing to put put taxpayer money in. For example, I would favor putting taxpayer money in building a hospital on this side of the valley, right? And that probably would be a private venture. But you and every one of you have to decide, is this public benefit of bringing that theater here worth the cost? And I think that's what's going to actually happen. People will talk about this, yes or no, depending upon whether they think there's enough of a benefit. And I'm sure that before this all goes to council, there'll be more revelations to occur because we've been fed this information piecemeal. Are there any questions?
Now, they've already invested in moving the auto sale or automotive property, and they've already invested in tearing down the building. So now that they've invested in it and they're obligated to the state, is this like they're going to be their excuse to continue, or do you think they can back out if it doesn't look so good?
Are you talking about Laemmle or are you talking about us?
The city has already invested in moving that automotive shop. They've already invested a lot into those two blocks. So it's almost as if they've said they're going to go ahead with this and they can't back out, right?
Well, I think what the city, from the city's perspective, is they want to see Newhall redeveloped. and they want to use the successor agency to the best that they possibly can to make that happen. Now, from what I understand, in the dissolution of redevelopment agencies, and I'm not an expert in redevelopment agencies, but from what I understand in dissolution of redevelopment agencies, the amount of taxes that come back to the city will still come back to the city that are offsetting debt created by the redevelopment agency, but no new funding will come. So that means that anything new that they do, like this project, is not going to come from the state. It's going to, well, unless they get a separate grant. You know, maybe what they should do is to really get a good feel as to whether the public really wants this. Maybe they should make it a bond issue and put it on the ballot. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Is it true that one of the council members has property in that vicinity of the new project?
Yes, she does. We were speaking about Lorraine West. Lorraine West owns 10 acres on the other side of Railroad Avenue, right at the intersection of Lyons and Railroad. If you would be able to hop over that road where the sign says that the road is going to go through at some point in the future, that's her property. So this is definitely, that's one of the reasons why she recused herself from the last vote and discussion on this. It's interesting that our city attorney requested that both Lorraine and Tim Ben recuse themselves because Tim Ben works for the Theater Guild, but the FPPC sent back in a letter that says, yes, Lorraine needs to recuse herself because she has property close by, and no, Tim Ben does not because he's a salaried employee and has no financial gain. So, yes, we do have a council member that, and to some extent, some of the properties you might talk about whether some of the properties on Main Street itself will increase in value. Yes, so you can understand why this is going to be a contentious hot button issue. People are going to get lined up very strongly on both sides, and I would hope they would all look at this from what's the best for Santa Clarita, not what's the best for themselves. Anybody else?
Section 8.
Section 8? No. No, we can talk about that in a little while on a different location. Okay? All right, well, thank you. That's Laemmle. I can't wait for next year's summer surprise. We'll see what happens. There you go.